Our next guest.
Anyone get stretch break?
Does somebody need
I don't know,
to do your
do we, Jen?
camera for you?
It's just running. I'm gonna stay over here, so I'm not.
Do you want to say?
Unlike Kelly, I'm not gonna be brief. No, I'm just kidding. This might seem like Groundhog Day to some of you. We talked about Smart Schools project for the last couple of years.
I just asked John, because we've recently gotten our approval and, you know, we're gonna be in the phase of ordering and spending money now. I just thought it'd be a good time for John to kind of come back and
Videotaping you?
touch.
It's
I
on.
am.
Oh, okay.
I just have to stay in one spot.
Because there are 2 board members who will.
Well, yeah, and there was a couple of new board members, I think, since we had talked about this. I think it is a good review, and now that we did finally get approval, it's a good marker point to actually start talking about how we're gonna use the Smart Schools money. But just a general overview of how it worked. 2 years ago, the New York State approved the spending plan for Smart Schools Bond Act, which really freed up $2 billion worth of funding that was going to be earmarked specifically for schools. For instructional technology, school safety, those types of things. Fully 100% reimbursable, so it would not be anything that would, you know, that we wouldn't get a percentage back. It's going to be 100% after we get it approved. Every school district qualified for a different amount of funding for the Smart Schools. Geneseo's take on it was about $630,000. Some schools got more, some schools got less, based on a funding ratio as far as need.
How often is that paid? How long is that paid? What's the term? Is it all at once, or is it over several years?
So basically, you could spend it all at once, or you could spend it out over 5 years, 10 years. Something that was, I think, I'd have to question, and Tim, you might know the answer to this, but in the Livingston County News article when they were talking about this, they said it had to be spent in 10 years.
I had never heard that before.
Yeah, okay.
That was the first time I'd ever seen that. Up until that point, I had never seen a time limit placed on it.
Yeah, so I mean, there's some schools that haven't even put in any proposal for it yet at all because they want to kind of see how this is going to work. And some schools, you know, were the first ones through. It took us a while to kind of fight through some of the red tape as far as what they wanted that proposal to look like. Some things that did cloud it a little bit, having a non-public school in our district, they're entitled to some of that funding, so that was one of the things that had our initial proposal kicked back to them. But they were honestly working with the state on this one. They were very helpful. I mean, they were a resource. Something that was a challenge was there was no definitive timeline on like when the next level of approval was going to happen. So it did take quite a while. The first step is having your technology plan approved, because I think what they really wanted to do was get a survey of what technology was already in school districts. So they didn't want people applying for technology they didn't need if they didn't have the true infrastructure as far as a wireless network or the infrastructure of a network. To, among other things, incorporate things like online testing. They didn't come right out and say that, but like when you look at the survey that they're looking for, like the data they're collecting, they definitely want to see how many devices do you have, what type of devices do you have, how fast are they, that type of thing. So annually now we have to have that technology plan or technology survey approved, get initial public input. So we did that last year. We did it before one of the board meetings, did it at faculty meetings, through surveys. Parent surveys were open for months last year, and that was helpful to kind of get a gauge on what people thought we needed with technology, what we were doing okay with, but that was already up there for our initial proposal, and that's something that I'm going to continually, like we as a district are going to continually need to reevaluate, both from our students, our staff, and the public as far as, you know, because technology is always going to be changing. If we're going to look at this over 5 years or 10 years, it's hard to predict 5 years down the road what those needs are going to be. So I think we're going to consistently need to go back to get that kind of input. So a year ago, we had our initial Board of Ed proposal, and it was approved for that. After that, we could apply to NYSED for that initial spending plan. So of that $630,000 that we were entitled to, our initial spending plan was about $260,000 of it, and I'll just kind of break that down in a second. Once the plan does get approved, which was approved a few weeks ago, as soon as you start spending the money, you should get reimbursed within 60 days. So working with the business office, we'll see exactly how that piece of it works as far as the reimbursement piece.
You have cash.
Turn in a CD.
Right, exactly. So the initial plans for the use of the funds for, you know, just in general, over 5 years, over 10 years. Replacing our security camera system was really one of the high priorities. We have a pretty antiquated security camera system where it's all analog cameras. Every camera in the school and outside of the school has a run back to our wiring closet over here, and it's kind of landlocked us to add new cameras in. The quality of the footage isn't there, so we're upgrading that front end to an IP-based system, which is more like a computer network, where we can very easily add much better cameras with better ease. So that was one of the major initiatives that we wanted to take on right at the get-go. Desktop replacements, both in classrooms, offices, and computer labs. A couple of years ago, or last year I think it was, we had a couple of students come and talk about the use of Chromebooks in the classroom. That's something that we want to keep rolling out. We have mobile carts in the libraries right now, basically small carts of 12. But we want to open that up widely. We're not quite ready for a one-to-one kind of initiative where each student is getting a device, but classroom sets of devices is really what we're looking at starting with. The projection and audio systems in the classroom, all the classrooms have ceiling-mounted projectors onto smartboards, and in some classrooms, especially with a vibrating ceiling, you can really see a vibration on them because the heating and cooling units that are attached to the ceiling grid will shake a little bit. And just out of age, some of them are pretty dim, so we're going with the ultra short throw projectors, which immediately brighten up the rooms, and better audio systems because so much of the content that we're using right now is obviously digital, so getting a better sound system is extremely helpful in those classrooms. After that, we're looking at individual department requests because every classroom is going to have some different needs. For a math classroom, needing a new set of graphing calculators would be obviously very different than an art classroom or a music classroom. So the second level of this is going to be kind of surveying individual departments, and we've started doing that initially. We're looking at what those individual classroom needs are going to be. Science probes, document cameras in all the classrooms. Probably by the end of this, we'll be looking at redoing our wireless network. It's already about 3 or 4 years old right now. So if we look at this over a 4-year or 5-year span, that's really what we're going to be looking at sometime during that span, upgrading our wireless access. So year one, I was thinking it was going to be last year, but really it's this year now that we're in, so I kind of pushed all of this out. This is what our spending plan was just approved on. So we've already started working with the vending company that we had several different proposals that we were looking at, but the security camera system, the desktop replacements, and some of the things that I just talked about. We are looking to pilot 8 classroom sets of Chromebooks, so 4 in each building, 4th grade and 5th grade, 2 sets in each of those rooms, and then in the middle school, high school. Just looking at the use right now, we kind of looked at who's using them the most and try to get classroom sets into those teachers or departments' hands first. So they'll internally share those on carts in between them. iPads in the elementary primary level is still using iPads in learning center type of situations, and it's really kind of starting to replace those desktops, those classroom sets of desktops that we did have for so long in the classrooms. But I'll pause here for a second. Are there any questions about what that first level is? Because after this, it's kind of turning into what our future plans are going to be, and I'll be brief through that, but this is really what was just approved in the classrooms.
John, the bullet about iPads, I just want clarification. When we talk about 8 per grade level, we're talking about 8 per classroom.
8 per grade level at that initial level, because they already have, some of the classrooms have 5 or 6 already, so each classroom will be getting 2 more right now. So if we think of 4 kindergarten teachers, each one of those classrooms will be getting 2 more, in addition to, and they have anywhere from 4 to 6. We're not looking at full classroom sets in those rooms because still how we're seeing them being used. Some of them are supplementing them with some of the iPads that we have in the media centers, but getting at least 2 more into each classroom is going to be that next level of use in that primary level. Anything else on that initial piece?
Who's piloting the Chromebooks again? You said 2 in 4th and 2 in 5th?
2 classroom sets in 4th grade that'll be shared among the 4 teachers, 2 classroom sets in 5th grade, and then at the middle school, high school level, science department's always using them, so that's going to be a cart in the science room. Foreign language has been using them quite a bit, English, and then we're looking at the 6th grade team. So we're also geographically looking around the building, so because right now they have to come to the media centers to get them. And the heaviest hitters, like if we have those cards sitting over there, I think they will start getting more, focused use in those rooms, and free these up for other classrooms. So the second year, continuing along these lines, but once again, this is fluid, this is a moving target, so we'd have to kind of go back and think, are there other needs at this point that we're going to be looking at? But that's where I would look at specific classroom enhancement, such as like MIDI keyboards, that kind of thing, graphing calculators, science probes, but also continue that desktop replacement. You'll see over this 5 years, like the last slide kind of compares how we're budgeting technology spending through BOCES and equating that with the Smart Schools funding, because eventually that Smart Schools funding is going to go away. And if we can start building up our line item for our EduTech replacement plan for computer hardware, it might make that a little bit more reasonable at the end, because for the most part, when we've been funding major technology overhauls, whether it's our network equipment or desktop replacement, it's usually through a bond act or an equipment reserve. And the idea of this would be spending the Smart Schools money down and start building that budget up is what we had talked about. But once again, it's still in the planning parts of that. So continuing with the same type of thing for the next 3 years and increasing several more. And by then, will we necessarily be looking at iPads? Maybe it's a different type of tablet in that time frame, or a different type of Chromebook. But we still look at that small portable technology that can be brought right into the classrooms and put down in the student use is probably not going to be going away. Will the devices change? Yes. And will the prices change? Yes. So these are moving targets at this
So
point.
year 3 says 18, 19, that really means 19, 20, right?
No, I fast forwarded, so that's right. That's right. Year 1 is right now.
17,
Yeah,
18,
and then
19,
yeah.
19, 20.
And then 19, 20 would be year 4. Like I'm counting this year. This is year 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had fast forwarded everything up because I was thinking it was going to start last year,
Yeah,
but it
okay.
took really a year to get approval for this. So I put it out to the 5th year where our wireless upgrade would happen in that 5th year. That's probably not realistic. We're probably going to be upgrading the wireless network before that. But those are the major things that we're looking at in that Smart Schools funding plan. And this kind of shows what I'm talking about, where this would be the spending plan over, if we spent it over 5 years, which we don't have to do, but basically it would start the biggest year, year 1, and then whittle that down so it's a little bit more of a gradual, as far as losing that funding stream, because that's a pretty aggressive funding stream that we're going to eventually lose access to. But at that same time, this year we have, I think, $20,000 budgeted for the hardware replacement in our EduTech budget. To gradually put that up each year, 30,000, 40,000, might be a little bit more attainable and a little bit easier for people to swallow. And then by that 5th year, if we had a line item that was more in that $60,000, $70,000 range, we might have a more consistent desktop replacement, so it doesn't take us that long to actually replace some of the hardware that we have here. So that's the general overview. Really, year 1 is the one that's the one that's approved, but we would once again still be getting input from people. But we just wanted to kind of give the board an update as far as where we are.
So,
Yeah.
John, I see, if I kind of summarize what I
Sure.
just saw, there's investments being made in computing, networking, the devices to input to that network and so on.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see anything, at least doesn't jump out at me. We've outlined a number of STEM to STEAM goals, and what are we doing in that realm? The engineering side, or improving some of our capabilities
I'm thinking the biggest one would be in that 2nd year when we're looking at individual classroom requests. Because I know the requests coming from like Jason Laughlin's technology program and Rob Antonucci and Beth's art program are vastly different from a traditional English classroom, where it's almost having to go into those classrooms and say, okay, what are those specific needs? Like when we took the field trip over to the technology lab and saw what they were doing, I think it's going to be so much more individualized at that step. We've gotten a couple people some pilot things, like you mentioned STEAM, so like just even in the music realm, getting our music teachers some of those MIDI keyboards so they can plug them right into GarageBand and actually start teaching their kids how to compose music in there. Small at first, get a couple sets of them, but then the ability to actually bring an entire class in and have the kids share out in voice. I think each room would look a little bit differently, so it's kind of hard to generalize
so
it.
that part didn't jump out at me, but
Sure.
I appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah.
John, I'm sure you're thinking in terms of cameras and security for the new building, for the new transportation.
Sure. So, when we upgrade our camera system right now, all the existing cameras that are on there, will still talk to our new system. The quality of them aren't gonna be nearly as good, but the plan also incorporates adding like 15 additional new cameras, which will be much better quality. And we're definitely thinking of the new transportation facility as we're looking at that. But it's gonna be a stark difference when you see
Is
the
it
new
gonna be
cameras
wireless
versus the old
between the
ones.
facilities?
We're gonna have a fiber line
Fiber
actually
line?
completely, directly out there, so we're gonna have a
Okay.
switch right at the new facility. So, the card access into the building as well as the cameras will all be part of that, and phones and everything. Anything else?